Okay, so you may be wondering how long it took for me to build this PC that you're seeing. Well, it took a pretty long time, but it was well worth it. So I'm putting in the power supply right now, which is what supplies power to the motherboard, the CPU, the GPU, the hard drive, pretty much everything. It powers everything in the computer that needs to be powered. That's including LED strips and all the aesthetic pieces of the PC. I actually had to take back out the power supply again because I figured out once you get the power supply in the case, it's pretty dang hard to get the wires plugged in, because I only plugged in the cable for the motherboard. I didn't plug in the CPU or GPU cables, power cables, so I found that to be very difficult, so I ended up having to take that back out. But this was a learning process for me. It took a while for me to get the CPU cooler on the CPU, but I'm gonna wait until the footage actually comes up and time lapse to talk about that. So I was putting in the hard drive, and nothing really too complicated about the hard drive. You know, you just take the hard drive, you mount it to the tray that I am about to pull out, and yeah, you put it back in and plug the SATA cable, which is the cable that transfers all the data to and from other hard drives and to the computer, and then you gotta connect the power cable. So yeah, this is when I'm taking back out the power supply because I realized it's very hard to get cables plugged into it once it's in the case, because it was not designed for that. The cable management area is too small to get your full hand into, so I had to take that out and put all the wires in, and it actually took me a while to get all the wires organized and figure out which ones went to what, but in the end it worked out. So once I got all the cables in, I decided to route them into their proper locations, so that way it'd be easier to access once I got the motherboard in and all the other components in, so it would be easier that way. And yeah, so I decided to turn the case around, flop it on its side, and start routing those cables, because I didn't really feel like doing much afterwards, or after I put the CPU in the motherboard and got the motherboard in, which is actually one of the hardest, if you will, things. So here I'm putting in the CPU. This is the most crucial part of this build. If I screwed this up, I had wasted almost $400, and it would have set me back, and I would have had all that money back, but it went fine, and yeah, so after I did that, then I decided that I would apply try and figure out how the mounting mechanism worked for the CPU cooler. Because I later figured out that you have to mount it from the back of the motherboard, which I did not know, so that was actually a good learning experience for that. But that's the CPU heatsink that you're looking at right there, that silver hunk of metal to the right of the motherboard. And yeah, so that is the mounting mechanism. You mount that to screws that is mounted with a mount on the back of the motherboard. That wasn't explained very well, but if you understood, great job. With this little gray strip that I put on the CPU, you can probably see, is thermal paste. So when you have two metal objects like aluminum and copper, like the heatsink is copper on the CPU cooler, and then the aluminum is on the CPU. If you have just metal to metal contact, it doesn't work. The heat transfer is not enough, and your system will overheat. So in turn, what you do is you put thermal paste, so there is a constant heat transfer between the copper and aluminum, so that keeps them cool. You need a fan on the heatsink to spread the heat. So the heatsink takes the copper through the 4 direct copper pipes, and it spreads it into the heatsink. The heatsink spreads that heat out, and the fan dissipates it into the air, and then the back case fan expels it out the back of the case. That's basically how your airflow works. But yeah, so here I'm trying to fix something, because it's fix the stud, because the screw is stuck inside the stud and I can't get it in. So yeah, that kind of sucks, but you know, things happen. So I had to look at the directions on how to mount the CPU cooler, and they were a tad bit confusing because I didn't fully understand how to mount a CPU cooler, and I really wish I would have watched somebody else install that same cooler because it literally would have helped me, and yes, so that was that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to route the motherboard power cables through the rubber grommets, which helps prevent cable wear when it, not that the cables are going to be moving around, but it helps it prevent, because if there was just a hole there, then the wire could feasibly rub on that metal and then wear a hole in it, causing major problems. So that's what that is for. So I was routing it through, and I needed a little bit of extra light because it was kind of hard to see in there, and you actually have to press surprisingly hard to get it to go in the socket. But actually, something that I figured out is that it's really, I didn't like the way that the cables were routed, so I decided to take it back out and then reroute it through the top grommet instead of the middle grommet because it just looked better. I mean, because, you know, it's a $1,700 gaming computer. It's gotta look sick, am I right? So, that was, you know, pretty easy. I mean, as long as you know what cables go where, then you'll be fine. But here's the graphics card. This processes most games, and this is what causes your frames per second to increase in games. Frames per second is how many different pictures every second the monitor displays. So, I mean, this is really easy. You plug it in, and then you connect the power to it, so yeah. Okay, so I know you already saw that the heatsink was in the previous part of the video, or of the time-lapse, but I had to reinstall it because it was originally vertical and I had to reinstall it horizontal because it leaves more room for the RAM, which is on the bottom right of the CPU cooler. It leaves room for the fans to go on top and bottom for a push-pull configuration, which basically means it'll pull air up through the bottom and shove it out, and then push it out the top. So it leaves more room for that. And yeah, so what RAM does is it'll increase your frames per second, but it's not going to affect it as much as if it were like your graphics card. So I had to install the fan, and then I actually did a really good job at routing the cable for the fan, so it looked really clean. And yeah, so that's that. But you got to see the cool part of this build, which was actually building the computer. But it took a lot of hard work, and when I say a lot of hard work, I mean a lot of hard work, because I had to mow a lot of lawns, and it was not pleasant. So here is me mowing my lawn and my neighbor's lawn at the same time, kind of like a double whammy situation. So I think I got 35 bucks for this, mow and edge, just the front lawn, so yeah. But one thing that you'll learn when you're weed eating is wear eye protection, because what you're about to see is me being stupid. Oh, would you look at that? You got something stuck in your eye. I wonder how that happened. So, you know, that was kind of a stupid move, but, you know, it happens, and you learn lessons. So, this is a benchmark that I'm running on my computer, and it smashes it for the most part. There's a few choppy parts, but, you know, it's really GPU intensive, and it pushes my graphics card to its limits. And this is a benchmark / stress test, so basically what it means is it's using 100% of the GPU's processing power. So, you know, it actually got really high frames per second. As you can see in the top right, it'll tell you the frames per second. And I don't actually remember off the top of my head what it was, but you can see that, so yeah. But this build was totally fun. And it was a great experience because I got to benefit from it. One, because I earned all the money myself. I did hard work and earned it. And so when you finally get all that, it's a great feeling, and to know that it's yours and truly yours. Also, the fact that I donated processing power to small organizations using Boink, which is software, it's a program. So what Boink does is it'll send your computer a task for it to complete. Once it's done completing the task, which can take 12 to 24 hours depending on the task, it'll send back the answer and it'll send the results to the organization. Because, you know, not all organizations, especially small ones, they don't have supercomputers. So, you know, this is a really great way to do it. There's also another program called Folding at Home, which is similar stuff, except it's more math and science-based, which is a bunch of algorithms and stuff. So that's really cool, and that's something that I thought would be good. One, to give back, and also you know, just as something that felt good to do. But yeah, so I would honestly really recommend doing this if you're into computers, or you just want to do it because you want a gaming computer, or it's just a great experience. And don't ask your parents for the money. Go out and earn it yourself. I mean, it feels amazing when you finally get it and you know it's yours, but also it's a great learning experience, and you learn that hard work pays off, which is a great and valuable thing to have. So, with all this talking, you probably want to see my computer. Well, first I'm going to make you finish watching this benchmark, and then you get to see my computer, which I think is pretty sick, but I'm going to let you judge that for yourself. So, there's going to be photos at the end, and yes, so I'm going to let you finish watching this benchmark, and I'll see you then. Okay, so one more thing I want to add in before this benchmark ends is that this wasn't just an excuse for me to build a gaming computer. I know it seems like it, but it was honestly because this is the career path I want to get into, computer hardware engineering and stuff, so that's another reason, along with the fact that I earned all the money, and that I donated processing power to organizations, so enjoy the pictures of the computer. Thank you for watching this video. If you did, I don't know how many people are going to watch this, but if you did, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to read about Boink, you can look over there in that general direction. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can check that out in the description below. I'll link you to the Boink's website. And if you want to see the spreadsheet that I made for how I earned all the money, like the Lonza mode, when I worked with my dad and stuff, you can look over there. Or if you're watching this video on YouTube, you can look in the description below. I'll leave a link to there, and yeah, it'll be view only, so don't try and do anything. It's not going to work. And yeah, thank you for watching, and peace.